Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the belated Azeroth Daily for the 5th of February 2011, as delayed from yesterday, so you're getting a special Saturday edition to make up for that. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of WoW news and comments. Before we go on, in the background we have Mr. Volatron's latest remix, One Night at Molokko's. Please go and check it out. The link to the full song is in the description below this video. He is awesome, and you should absolutely go and listen to what he has. Anyway, the headlines today, Luck of the Draw seems to be the words on everyone's lips right now. This is in relation to a buff that has been in the game for quite some time since the random dungeon finder came in and is actually getting significantly increased. So before this, you would get 5% buff to damage, healing, or health if you had at least one random player in the group. In the new patch, which is supposedly coming out next week, although obviously we can't confirm that, it is being increased to 5% per random player up to a maximum of 15%. So if you've got 3 random players, you're going to get 15% extra damage, healing, and health, which is going to make the dungeon, I would think, significantly easier. This does not apply if you don't have random players in the group, however. I am really conflicted on this change, to the point where I'll be discussing it in full on this week's Blue Please, which returns on Friday, the 11th of Feb. Whatever the case, a quick roundup of it would simply be, I understand why they're putting it in, and indeed it is justified in Ghostcrawler's blog here, about making up for a lack of coordination and things like that in pugs, and this is to compensate for that, things that you would not find in, say, a guild group, which is more coordinated, but I don't think he really realizes the side effect of this, which is, of course, if you make dungeons too easy, people don't learn, and we get the same problem that we had in Wrath. Whatever the case, I'll go into it in full on the podcast at the end of next week. Blizzard continues its feature on the subject of new player tips over on the usbattle.net site, and is asking veterans to provide tips on overcoming the fear of PvP. So if you are a newer player, you might want to read some of these. Some of them are actually useful, surprisingly, although you will find a few things that are perhaps not so much. The majority of it, though, is pretty damn good, so go and check it out. On the subject of PvP, on the usbattle.net forums, there's a poll you can actually get involved in as regards to PvP content, so go and check that out. If you're into some collectibles, then you might be interested to know that the newest series of World of Warcraft premium action figures, that's Series 7, is now available for pre-order. It consists of a Worgen spy, Garm Whitefang, as well as a human paladin, Judge Malthread, and an orc rogue, Garona Halforcen. And yes, most importantly, the paladin does appear to be in frickin' judgment. And with that, it's time for your Daily Blues. After a concern from a player in regards to the new gem slots being put into some gear, lylirra responds that existing gear will in fact get the new gem slots hotfixed in, so you do not need to worry about recrafting it. Dr. Totems is a little bit bothered about the presence of an ink trader exclusively in Dalaran, but it would appear the exclusivity contract has run out and ink traders are now being added to Stormwind and Orgrimmar in patch 4.0.6, so scribes can indeed rejoice on that particular matter. An interesting question comes in from Fate Swarm, the Goblin Mage, regarding bandaging in raid. She asks whether or not anybody has actually devised an effective strategy to use this on a regular basis as opposed to merely situationally, and Slorkus responds by giving a little bit of anecdotal evidence and just saying, hey, yeah, actually it kind of is situational, and you can't regularly use bandages in the current content, but there are certain things like, say, an obvious bandage on Cimarron and a transition between Phase 1 and Phase 2 Nefarian that are particularly useful. And last but by no means least, because some people still think this is actually acceptable, Bashiok reminds people that real-life threats made against players are not acceptable and will be reported to the authorities. I don't know why people think it's acceptable just because they're hiding behind a monitor, but I suppose that is the very essence of cowardice these days. And with that, it's time for your daily grind. This one follows up from some of the quests that you may have done in the Western Plaguelands. You pick them up for the Mender Stead, and you get this one in order to go and find a Worgen female who then sends you up towards a spider's cave, ladies and gentlemen, in order to find one of her companions who is webbed. However, the little twist on this one is that you have to find Nerubian venom in order to melt the webs. And of course, for your trouble, you get your ass kicked. Gotta love it. And with that, it's time for your weekly feature. This is Postcards from Azeroth. Now, the theme this week was to show me your heart's desire, perhaps something that you just can't quite get your hands on. You want it, you need it, you require it to live, but it is out of your reach. So we're going to kick it off right here with this one. This one comes in from Chris Myers, and this is, of course, the Gurubashi Arena. Evidently just can't quite get a hold of that bloody chest. You know, I have that problem all the time. Why are you looking at me like that? This one comes in from Azam, who would absolutely adore to have at his beck and call the Gnome-bliteration Fireball, and somehow I would not blame you for that particular desire. That's a good one to have. Probably got about 5,000 images of these, but this is probably the best shot I could actually find. This is from Anthony de Serza, and no, it is not Maev. That's not the object of his desires. It is, of course, the Warglaives of Azeroth that no doubt will still just not drop for him. In the case of Matthew Kelly, I don't know whether he wants the candle or whether the kobold wants the candle. If he wants the candle, he cannot take the candle because the kobold miner says so, and that is binding by international law, I will have you know. Oh dear, it's... oh yes, Nake Nay sends in this one right here. The object of his desire is that herb suspended in midair. You cannot has. It's as simple as that. This one comes in from Halash Lial, which is in fact a screenshot of the in-game monument to the cancellation of StarCraft Ghost. Apparently, desperately wants StarCraft Ghost. Trust me, I've played it, you don't. It is not very good. It was cancelled for a very, very good reason indeed. And that is a monument to Nova, the main character. Right, the object of Alexander Theophanopoulos, which is a fantastic name I might add, is riding skill for a mount. Oh dear, he has a mount, he just doesn't quite have the skill for it yet. How very, very unpleasant. You are one of 5,000 million people that has the Bronze Drake, however. Oh, the object of Lucas Kellenbach's desires. It's Frostmourne, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Why cannot have it? It will corrupt your soul, which I might add is incredibly inconvenient. It also has a terrible warranty. This one comes in from Andy Owens. The object of his desire is a mechanical sheep. Huh. Are you perhaps a steampunk Welshman by any chance? This one comes in from Stefan Popovic. He wants a Worgen slave to carry him all over the place. I have to wonder why you cannot mount Worgen, and no, not in that way, thank you very much, our peers. And this one comes in from Jonah Smith. The object of his desires is a Trollhawk. Well, you know what? If you rolled the proper race, then you would not have a problem with it. Or maybe you mean in real life, in which case that is a little bit trickier. And the winner, ladies and gentlemen, I think that I can really only give it to this one. It comes in from Gregory Montoya. The object of his desires is, of course, a T-Rex, mounting a rocket-powered shark with freaking laser beams. Who would not want that as a mount? In fact, I would pay big, big monies for that. So thanks a lot, get in touch, and we'll sort you out with a 60-day time card. As always, the theme for next week's contest will be announced on Monday's show, and with that, it's time for the mailbox. Now, usually I would not read overly long emails, because I simply do not have the time. I like to keep the show under 15 minutes, but I'm going to go for it anyway, because this is pretty good. And this one comes in from Blue Sparks, who says, the topic I wanted to bring up came up in my guild chat the other day when a large portion of the raid that night called it quits a few hours early due to us wiping repeatedly on Antramides. Despite everyone understanding the mechanics, the DPS kept dying and we didn't have enough DPS to kill them before we ran out of gongs. The topic was where Cataclysm stands relative to other MMOs, particularly Rift. I know you've repeatedly and accurately described Cataclysm as the Renaissance after the Dark Ages, which I agree with. The thing that I don't see is a whole lot of Cataclysm innovation. Cataclysm was renovation, and it was very good at that. It polished up a lot of different parts, save for a few parts like Outlands and Northrend, and it brought the majority of the content up to par. It applied many RPG elements to aid in the immersion, smoothed out the questing experience, and made the leveling experience much more enjoyable. However, it really didn't do much in terms of innovation. The biggest innovations I've seen thus far are the mechanics of raid bosses such as the Ascendant Council and Antramides, but that aspect of WoW absolutely needs to be innovative, otherwise it gets boring. The problem lies, I believe, in the engine of WoW. The engine is several years old now, and while there have been some upgrades, it remains several years old. So next to any other MMO like DCUO or Rift, it just doesn't look the same. Cataclysm fixed a lot of things, and that I have no problem with, it just wasn't very innovative. The core engine remains relatively untouched. Going from WoW, where characters and the environment are generally totally separate, to something like Bad Company 2, where the environment will drop many tons of concrete on your head, is a huge leap, and phasing can only go so far. Whether or not this problem lies with WoW itself or with all large game developers, I don't really know. Nobody can deny the recent influx of indie games in the video game market. Magicka, Super Meat Boy, Minecraft, etc. And I would attribute that to the fact that indie game developers are not afraid of taking risks and trying new things, while larger corporations seem to adhere to if it ain't broke, don't fix it. While the aphorism works in many places, a video game developer that cannot adapt and accommodate to a changing consumer base will be left behind. I was just wondering what your thoughts on the matter are. Oh, that is a long one, and it's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, I still view Cataclysm as the Renaissance after the Dark Ages, there's no question about that, but it wasn't a revolution, it was an evolution. It was as simple as that. It was taking the concepts that were there and had been there for years and updating them. And in terms of what they did there, I think they did a stellar job. There's no question about that. All of the leveling content plus the new content is far, far superior to anything they've put out previously. And of course, now being able to fly around the world is a big evolution on the game. But it is not a complete and total revolution. I think maybe some people were expecting that, but that was never really what Cataclysm was all about, as far as I could tell. It's unfortunate that they took out some of the biggest features that would have perhaps turned it into a revolution. I think the biggest one that we keep coming back to has got to be Path of the Titans. That promised an ability to level your character in a way that was not possible previously. You know, right now you just level up to 85. With Path of the Titans, after that, you were supposed to have these alternate progression routes that actually didn't involve leveling, that would allow you to further customize your character. They took that out. They just didn't seem to be able to pull it off, and they threw the whole concept away, which to me was very unfortunate because that was the most revolutionary feature they could have offered in Cataclysm. And as it stands, there are no revolutionary features in Cataclysm. None at all. You know, the biggest innovation, quote-unquote, that I would say is guild leveling, but that was done in War a couple of years ago, and Warhammer Online had that. That's where the concept was borrowed from, and Warhammer Online still does it better, I might add. It's got an awful lot more customization you can do in there, as well as the whole guild battle standard system, which is absolutely fantastic. I think that there are some unreasonable expectations regarding MMOs, like you're saying there about Bad Company 2. You can't have that in an MMO game. The technology, and I know it sounds very cliched and often inaccurate, but it's true in this case, it just isn't there yet. You're talking about very advanced physics systems that work in 32-player environments but do not work in massively multiplayer games. And phasing is a way of getting around a lot of that by displaying different things for different people, but it's still an element of something that you really have to keep in mind when you're designing any content is, oh, well, I could just blow up this building, but what about the guys around here? Or what about the other guys? Will it display the same way? Is the technology up to par? The engine certainly isn't. I think you've pointed that out very accurately. I think the only way that WoW can really get past that is a complete engine change. I would not be surprised if they do it. SOE have done it before, they did it with EverQuest, Blizzard certainly has the funds for it, and I think they will, at some point, actually do a complete engine change, and if that happens, then we could unlock all of this kind of stuff, but for the moment, yes, we are fairly limited in what can actually happen with it. This one comes in from JL, who says, after reading up on MMO Champion about the intended changes to the LFD system, i.e. giving it the 15% buff, and what seems to be gradual nerfs to every raid and dungeon out there, I got to thinking about how I feel it is time for Blizzard to introduce a new level of difficulty. Normal dungeons are a joke, and heroic dungeons require very little more than normals in order to succeed. Normal raids are slightly better, if only just so, but heroic raids are quite difficult. Not really a bad thing, to be honest. However, just normal and heroic difficulty is not enough anymore. The majority of the content is either far too easy for a large portion of the player base's tastes, and the hard modes are beyond the scope of what most are willing to go through. What would your opinion be of Blizzard introducing a new legendary level of difficulty rating? Okay, I don't have to go the rest of this because I think we actually get the idea here, and I'll simply turn around and say, yes, without question, there should be more than 2 levels of difficulty. There is a game that does this way, way, way better, and it's called DDO. That's Dungeons & Dragons Online. Almost every dungeon in that game has at least 4 levels of difficulty, some have 5. And it's wonderful because it actually goes all the way down to solo. Like, you could solo the dungeon content in there by picking the solo level difficulty, and then going all the way up. And usually hard and the expert level have to be done in groups, but if you're really good, then you can actually do them in hard, and you gain benefits for doing so. So I absolutely think there should be more than 2 levels of difficulty, no question about that. it adds variety. If you want to cater to a large audience, then instead of nerfing this content and nerfing that content, then yes, give a third level or even a fourth of difficulty and say, right, okay, you want a casual mode? Here is a casual mode. We strip out most of the trash, we make things easier, make it nice and easy for players that aren't quite as good, and you know what? That is where you can get your gear. It's nowhere near as good, but you can do the content, you can see the content, and you can get your gear. Right now, that's what's being done with normals, and it ain't enough, because then you've got heroic, like you said, and that is actually a massive leap in difficulty, as we've very clearly seen by just looking at the stats in Raid or Die. Very huge jump, and yes, a lot of guilds aren't able to make that, but they're not satisfied with what they have. So in my opinion, it does need to be a more gradual curve, and the way that you would have a gradual curve of learning and getting better and better at the game is to provide multiple tiers of difficulty. And I don't believe that nerfing normals down so that pretty much anyone can waltz through them, and then making heroics really, really hard and saying, oh, well, that's fine, we're catering to the hardcore crowd. It's like, well, what about this massive great chunk of people in the middle? You can't just divide people into two camps, you're crazy? Like I say, I've always believed that they should have more, and they definitely should put that in. And thankfully, Tom Chilton has acknowledged that, did so at Gamescom last year, I believe, and we're hoping to see that coming into the game. Okay, folks, I'm done. Thanks a lot for watching Azeroth Daily today. Please remember to thumb it up if you like it, and of course, thumb it down if you don't. It's very much appreciated, and I will see you on Monday with another episode.